Welcome everybody, hi. In this next chapter, we continue to discuss how we experience our world. This chapter 5 is about learning, and then our next chapter 6 is about memory. Note that these next two chapters, learning and memory, really complement one another. Learning something new is a waste of time without having memory as a place to store all our learned experiences so that we can recall them at a later date when needed, right? Memory, our next chapter to follow, would be useless without a means of getting information onto memory. Think of memory like an empty hard drive on your computer, just sitting there waiting for information to be put on it, right? Watch for three types of learning in this chapter, or three means of acquiring information: classical conditioning, operant conditioning, and cognitive learning, also known as learning through observation. Everything you have ever learned in your entire life, I mean since you were an infant, everything was learned through one of these three methods of learning. First, classical conditioning is called classical because it was the first to be discovered, and that was by Ivan Pavlov. This is learning by association, and it's based upon experiences that allow us to make new associations between two events. That is, one event is associated with something else that is important or memorable for us. It's an interesting historical note that Pavlov himself was a physiologist studying animals. He was not even a psychologist. True story. The second type of learning is called operant conditioning. The operant conditioning sounds very technical, operant, but it's actually quite intuitive and simple to understand. Think about this. Operant conditioning is learning from the consequences, meaning if my actions bring about positive results, then I will remember that, and so I am more likely to do that action again. And if my action brings negative results, then I'll remember that too, and I'm less likely to do that action again. Try not to be intimidated by the technical vocabulary here in this chapter. Lastly, cognitive learning, the third type, cognitive learning, is also called learning by observation. And adults are very familiar with this. We observe the behavior of other people and the consequences of that behavior, and then we assume that the same thing would happen to us. For example, if I acted the same way as that person, the same consequences would happen to me, whether they be good or bad consequences. That's the third form of learning. Again, everything you've ever learned in your entire life, and I mean since you were an infant, everything you ever learned was through one of these three methods of learning. The study of learning is a really interesting piece of the history of psychology that we'll talk about in this chapter. It's cognitive psychologists who spend most of their time studying learning and related issues and how we take in information and events around us. So let's dive into chapter 5 and continue to discuss how we experience our world. Let's go.